Good evening and welcome to the Buck Stops here. It's been a week since the tragic hit-and-run accident that took the life of 32-year-old Siddharth Sharma, who was crossing the street on his way home at 8 o'clock in the evening. Today, the boy allegedly driving the car last week he turned 18 yesterday. He'd already been warned twice before of rash driving after crashing his car into another in February and fined for dangerous driving in March. It's astounding on two counts: one, that the boy's family allowed him to drive repeatedly without a license and openly flout the law, and two, that the police didn't take stronger action against clear violations. Today, the police finally decided to charge the boy's father with the more stringent culpable homicide not amounting to murder charge. Well, of course, before we get to our main discussion tonight, pluralism and tolerance have been the hallmark of Indian civilization. President Pranab Mukherjee said today, asking people to remain alert to communal tensions rearing its ugly head anywhere. Delivering the Arjun Singh Memorial Lecture at the Nehru Memorial Museum in honor of the Congress veteran, he also stressed that democracy is not all about numbers but also calls for consensus building.
It is important that the values of tolerance, respect for contrary views, and patience are inculcated amongst the citizens, particularly the youth. Pluralism and tolerance have been the hallmark of our civilization. This is a core philosophy that must continue undeterred, for India's strength lies in her diversity.
Well, important words from the President, but let's get back to our topic of discussion tonight, which is about the impunity with which underage driving seems to be taking place in the city. Law enforcement, the police turning a blind eye, parents allowing their children to get away with this kind of violation. This is going up across the city, and it resulted just last week in the tragic death of Siddharth Sharma. Well, joining me on the show to talk about this particular case, we have Siddharth Sharma's sister Shilpa Mittal, who's joining us from her residence. We also have Adarsh Shastri, who's a spokesperson and MLA from the Aam Aadmi Party, to talk about the law and order situation and the way people actually flout these rules in the city. We also have with us former Delhi Police Officer, Joint Commissioner of Delhi Police, Maxwell Pereira, joining us from his residence, and in the studio, lawyer Mihra Sood as well. Shilpa Mittal, let me come across to you first, because we know that the police today has charged this young boy's father with culpable homicide not amounting to murder. The earlier charge was one of abetment to culpable homicide. For a man who's not actually been behind the wheel, this is a stringent charge, but do you feel that this will be some kind of justice now for you, the fact that he has even been charged with this?
Definitely. I think he should have been arrested the same day because the car, actually he's the car owner, and the son was driving the car, and he's an underage boy, as he has said, and doesn't have a license to drive it. It is almost like having a gun and giving it to your son, and you're okay with it. So I think they should really take care of it, and he's definitely responsible for it. And if it is not stopped here, I personally feel that tomorrow people will start hiring juveniles for murders and rash driving, killing, so that they can get away, because now everybody knows there's a loophole in the system.
Okay, all right, loophole in the system. Maxwell Pereira, before I bring Mihra into this, let me come across to you. This particular individual was apparently fined on one occasion, was involved in another car accident, although a minor one, in February. He's been obviously pulled up by the police, traffic police, in the past in connection with these incidents. But there's an impunity with which this boy has been allowed to get behind the wheel yet again. I mean, no license, no learner's license, no reprimand apart from a rap on the knuckles, and a compromise that's reached. What kind of compromise do you reach when there's been an accident like this involving a minor behind the wheel?
Maya, obviously there has been lack of diligence in this. Surely the repeated offences have not been taken note of or cognizance of even by the magistracy. I don't know whether these repeated offences have been projected to the magistracy, but there is a law in this country. It is true that juveniles up to a certain age are considered juveniles, I mean youngsters, and there's nothing, that's the law of the country. That is, you and I made that law through our representatives, and we have to follow that law, number one. But as far as the other matters are concerned, whatever law there is, then enforce it. Enforce it strictly and diligently. I think there should have not been any procrastination in arresting and slapping the father with the stringent sections as possible. There is abatement to whether it is murder or any other crime. Most advanced countries, most developed countries in their law have a provision for aiding and abetting, and to my mind this is perfectly fine. The police should not have waited a week. They should have done it right away. That's my opinion.
Okay, all right. Mihra Sood, let me bring you into this, because there's a couple of things that I think need some sort of legal attention over here. One, of course, is that the father has been charged with this as a crime. The second is, you know, this boy was 17 on Monday. He turned 18 yesterday. And for him to sort of be protected by the juvenile justice system in spite of being a repeat offender, I think is going to be offensive to people like Siddharth Sharma's family.
Okay, I'd like to, just a couple of things that I'd like to clarify on the law. Under the Juvenile Justice Act, he can be institutionalized for a period of up to 3 years. Under the IPC, under rash and negligent driving, which is section 304A, the maximum punishment is 2 years. Now, whether or not it's a case of culpable homicide not amounting to murder is arguable, but in previous cases it has not been held to be in such cases because the element of intent is not there. Even there, the maximum punishment is 10 years, but there is no minimum punishment. So, the fact is that between 304A of the IPC and the Juvenile Justice Act, he would be institutionalized for a longer period in any case under the Juvenile Justice Act. Whether it is under 304A or whether it is under culpable homicide not amounting to murder. The fact is the Juvenile Justice Act actually has a greater punishment than some of the offences under the IPC. That's one. The second is, look, we had this entire debate when the Juvenile Justice Amendment was being passed, right? And the Juvenile Justice Amendment says that children between the ages of 16 and 18 can be tried as adults, if they have been charged with a heinous offence, right? A heinous offence is defined as something where the minimum punishment is 7 years. None of these charges, even culpable homicide not amounting to murder, does not carry a minimum punishment of 7 years. So there is no question of it being brought under that. Now, if you are saying that the amendment itself is flawed or the act is flawed, we went through this 6 months ago. At that time also, many of us raised objections that where are you going to draw the line? Today it's 18, tomorrow it's 16, the next day you will say these offences, not those offences. And one of the defences raised in favour of the amendment was that for heinous crimes, you must presume that there is knowledge of the consequences and enough control over your action. Now you're going to extend that to other kinds of crimes, or you're going to lower the age further. This is exactly what people were afraid of at that time, and this is what's happening. And frankly, as much sympathy as I may feel for the family, and that is a great deal, and as much as I can understand their plight, I am here as somebody who works in the criminal justice system, who is interested in seeing that system improve. And that system cannot improve with case-by-case amendments, whatever case moves us, whatever case we feel strongly about. You talk of, Talibanizing the country. That is what this is, where you ignore the rule of law, you ignore the fact that the law says something, and you just, punish this person, hang that person.
That's one way of looking at ignoring the rule of law. Another way of looking at what's happened has been ignoring the rule of law. You have a 17-year-old who's been pulled up by the police on a couple of occasions, who's willfully has gone back behind the wheel in spite of the fact that he's been advised
But
not
the person,
to.
I mean, this is, if you're asking me is this a social problem? Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It's a big social problem. But I do not think that going after the person who is behind the wheel in cases like this is this long-term solution to that problem.
Okay,
The solution is going after the parents.
Right, which is what the police is doing today. So you agree with that as a course of action?
Those provisions in law are there, whether it is Section 180 of the Motor Vehicles Act, which says you punish somebody who allows their vehicle to be driven by someone without a valid license. There is another, I mean, given that the driver was pressurized into first coming forward and saying that, taking the blame for it until he found out that, the victim had died, etc., etc. Section 195A of the IPC, again, 7 years for threatening somebody to give false evidence. These are provisions that already exist and should be,
should be used
strictly
in this
implemented when it comes to parents.
Okay, all right. And I mean, you made the point about how this is also like a social problem that we're actually looking at, because at the end of the day, it points to a certain level of arrogance, a certain level of impunity with which there's flagrant violations of the law. I want to bring Adarsh Shastri into this as well. Mr. Shastri, this accident happened not very far away from the Delhi Secretariat as well. Civil Lines is a place where, the seat of Delhi government really has been in that vicinity. And you have a situation where there's somebody who's essentially tried to convince the driver to take the blame, then worked on a compromise with the police in order to minimize the impact of this accident on his son. We see this happen time and time again. How is Delhi government going to respond?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, the insensitivity here in Delhi that we see among people, especially those who feel they have the right to break the law and get away with it, that is something that has to be addressed. That insensitivity and that thought that you can get away with whatever you do has to be addressed. If you look at it, the car was estimated to be driving at over 100 kilometers an hour. I mean, leave aside the accident. In any other part of the world, in London, in New York, if you were driving at twice over the speed limit, you would go behind bars. So there is a challenge at that level first. The Motor Vehicle Act has been an archaic act which has not been, which is not kept, in sync with the changing times, the changing traffic situation, and so on. That needs to be amended very, very proactively and with current mindsets in perspective as soon as possible by Parliament. I think that the fact that you can get away is what is at the seed of this problem. If people did get this message that you cannot get away, I think that would lead to huge deterrence.
Got it. Max, before I go back to Shilpa Mittal, I want to just ask you, Maxwell Pereira, how often in your career as a police officer have you dealt with "Janta nahi main kaun hu," that kind of line?
That is our Indian mentality. You can't help it. You have everyone flaunting, and especially in a city like Delhi, everybody is the PM's chaprasi, or PM's chaprasi's chaprasi. So whether these are the kind of things that the police just have to handle, and I believe they do a good job of handling it. That doesn't really make much of a headway. But that apart, I mean, Mihira has really given you the correct perspective, and it is just that changing the law or drawing the line somewhere is not the answer. You can't keep on changing, and the thing is, there are enough provisions to act, and those provisions should be used by us to act. Like, for instance, you are harping on that repeated offenses, and again and again committing the same crime with impunity.
Right.
Now, this needed to have been, wasn't it really noticed? Or is it just today that it has been noticed that he has been committing crime repeatedly? So who was guilty? that if he was committing crimes repeatedly, these offences repeatedly, why was the compromise allowed?
Yeah.
Who allowed it?
I think that's a question, Shilpa Mittal.
Don't-
That's a
don't we-
question
don't
that.
we need to go into this? Yes?
Yeah. Shilpa Mittal, is there another channel of inquiry you also want that should be pursued? Not just the fact that, you know, the father has now been charged with this, but as Mihira pointed out, in terms of sentencing, which might be the greater sentence depending on who is being charged. But also, is there some intent that your family has to look at the people who pulled up and warned this young boy in February, in March, where those lapses were, not just on the lapses on the part of his family and his parents, but on the other side as well?
Sorry, can you please say that again?
I'm asking you, do you want to pursue any other investigation or inquiry as well against the people who allowed this boy to get off lightly in February and in March? It's not just about the father as his legal guardian who's being charged today, but there must have been some interaction with the authorities as well.
No, definitely. See, the way the boy was driving recklessly and has a previous record of rash driving, and he's still driving at the same speed without any botheration of killing somebody, shows that he knows that he can get away with the system, which he has already done that previously. So there is a lot of comfort, because I'm sure when he went home or called up his father after the accident, the father sent this dummy driver to take the the crime on his head. But then it was actually, I personally feel it was just his father assuring him that don't worry beta, do whatever, have fun, and you will be, you can be easily out, because I have a lot of money, I have deep pockets, and the system is so corrupt, then I will get you away,
Okay.
from
All
a
right, Ms.
murder.
Mittal, I want you also to react to what Mihira was saying earlier, because this charging of the father has happened today, but this boy turned 18 yesterday. He was technically a 17-year-old, a minor, when this accident happened. The point Mihira is making as a lawyer is that you can't keep changing the law on a case-by-case basis. It is what it is. It's taken a long time to even implement the new Juvenile Justice Act that has come into play, and it's here to stay. So, you're pushing for him to be tried as an adult perhaps is not going to work out.
See, I would like to tell everyone that you should stop calling him as a a kid or a juvenile, for the simple reason the act of him walking away from the accident very casually shows that he's very okay and cold. He's not even human. I think it's really cold. I mean, how can you just kill somebody on the road and walk away? I think it is not an innocent person's action, and he's just 2 or 3 days shy of being an adult. So I don't think so it's an on and off button that after 4 days he became this adult, and 4 days ago he was this baby who didn't know, and it happened.
All right.
Sorry, does it function like that?
Okay, Mihira, I want to bring you into this because what Shilpa Mittal is raising is sort of the emotional response of a family who's lost somebody as well. And as you're right, we have actually had this entire national debate on the juvenile justice system, specifically when it comes to things like underage driving, for example. It's a nuisance across the city, across the country. It's a nuisance. Where do things like the juvenile justice system then come into play when it deals with issues like this, which are not violent crimes, not heinous crimes, as has been pointed out,
Not premeditated crimes.
not premeditated, but nonetheless are sort of repetitive. As we keep talking about him having done this before.
Well, I think firstly as a direct response, and I mean, unfortunately I cannot help how completely tone deaf this sounds in response to an emotional appeal, and the family has all my sympathies, but I think legally the system never works on the assumption that there's an on-off button at the age of on a person's 18th birthday. That's not the assumption in the system either. The assumption is that, I mean, it's like, why is a person allowed to vote at 18? Why do we say, I mean, we talk about if a person can be punished at the age of below the age of 18 because they're a week short. Would we similarly say a person could also be given a driving license at the age of 18 because they're a week short? No, we can't, because the law helps us to draw that line. The law helps us to take away discretion from a corrupt system, right? If we were to say that you use your discretion, you decide a person below 18, above 18, 1 week short of 18, 2 weeks short of 18, you are breeding corruption by permitting that level of discretion, and criminal law cannot have that level of discretion. It has to have very strict and narrow definitions.
Okay.
So similarly, you can't say that a person who is an adult or who is above 18 may have, suppose, may be very immature and therefore should be treated as a juvenile.
Okay.
Right?
All right. Shilpa Mittal, very quick response, and I'll get Adarsh Shastri in on this as well.
Sorry?
Very quick response to what Mihira has just said.
See, Meera is trying to defend the law and the system, which I understand, that is what her job is. But I don't think so she is understanding the situation very well, for the simple reason that even a juvenile, if she thinks he is and it is not an adult act, I think it is a very, very cruel intentional act of walking away from, you know, somebody who you have just hit and could die. Yes.
Okay.
So I don't know. It's very, very cruel, I guess.
Adarsh Shastri, let's bring you into this, because, you know, on the one hand, we're looking at the rule of law and the way it's meant to play out. On the other hand, you have an emotional appeal by a family, but the law cannot be, you know, they say justice is blind. It cannot be determined by emotions.
No, I tend to agree with that. I mean, as a lawmaker, it deeply pains me to think that to an extent the law is helpless. Because the law has to be defined by narrow boundaries. But at the same time, you know, the matter is now in court and under investigation, so I can't say much on that. But all I can say is that I really don't find it possible that an 18-year-old or a person short of 1 week of 18 can get the car keys and walk away from the house without adults in the house knowing it. So I think it's a question of greater insensitivity.
So the adults are being charged in this case.
To go behind.
Yeah. The adults are being charged in this case.
Yeah, so absolutely. So I think that has to be the process.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
and
so
Maxwell Pereira, before we wrap up,
and you know, because the law is defined.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, Maxwell Pereira, I want to give you the last word. You know, this issue of underage driving that we've been really talking about. Is there any way to control it? Is there anything that the police, traffic police, should be doing better? We as citizens need, of course, be more proactive, but what about the police?
I believe society and the enforcers, whether be it the traffic police, be it the enforcement authority from the transport department, whoever it is, have been terribly lax in this and have not really applied the role, applied the stick the way it needs to be on the person responsible.
Yeah.
That is the parent or the other.
And as long as there's scope to
neglected this, yes. Yeah. There is plenty of scope to really come down heavily on the people whose responsibility it is to ensure that the car
there's scope
is
to
not,
come down heavily. What needs to be done is reduce the scope to compromise the way that this family clearly has done in the past with law enforcement. We'll have to wrap it at that. But thank you all for being on the show tonight. Thanks for watching the Buck Stops here. Good night.